We are the Ministry of the Real Truth, and this is a highly interesting book. We found it extraordinarily interesting. Titled The Table Talk of Martin Luther, by Martin Luther, born 1483, died 1546. This is information we had no clue on about Martin Luther, father of the Reformation, Roman Catholic scribe, monk, etc. The Table Talk of Martin Luther, translated and edited by William Hazlitt, Esquire, new edition to which is added The Life of Martin Luther by Alexander Chalmers, with additions from Michelet and Auden, published around 1872. Publishers note: this, or the present edition of Luther's Table Talk, is, as regards the main body of the book, exactly the same as that formerly published by Mr. Bogue in his European Library, being printed from the same stereotype plates, but it has some important additions. It seemed desirable that a life of Luther should be prefixed. It was therefore determined, after much examination and inquiry, to adopt that by Alexander Chalmers, subjoining illustrative anecdotes from the more recent biographies of Michelet and Auden. To this appended Luther's Catechism, always an interesting morceau. Is that like morsel or something like that? The portrait is another addition and is undoubtedly the most pleasing of all those painted by Luther's intimate friend, the celebrated Lucas Cranach. Notwithstanding these additions, the price of the volume has not been enhanced. December 20, 1856, HGB. Contents page. Introduction. The history of this remarkable volume, almost as extraordinary as its contents, is thus given by Captain Bell. Captain Henry Bell's narrative, or relation of the miraculous preserving of Dr. Martin Luther's book, entitled Colloquia Mensalia, or his divine discourses at his table, held with diverse learned men and pious divines, such as Philip Melanchthon, Caspar Cruciger, Justus Jonas, Vitus Dietrich, John Behugenhan, and their names many more, containing diverse discourses touching religion and other main points of doctrine, as also many notable histories and all sorts of learning, comforts, advice, prophecies, admonitions, directions, and instructions. Captain Henry Bell states here that he did hereby declare, both to the present age and also to that age in his time, also to posterity, that being employed beyond the seas in state affairs diverse years together, both by King James and also by the late King Charles, in Germany, he did hear and understand in all places great bewailing and lamentation made by reason of the destroying and burning of above 80,000 of Martin Luther's books, entitled his last divine discourses. For after such time as God stirred up the spirit of Martin Luther to detect the corruptions and abuses of popery, and to preach Christ, and clearly to set forth the simplicity of the gospel, many kings, princes, and states, imperial cities, and Hans towns fell from the Papist religion and became Protestants, as their posterity still are and remain to this very day. So they separated from the Roman Catholic Church and they became this church called the Protestants. But if you look at history, as today, they still cling to the Roman Catholic Church in their dress or their garb and their rituals, their rites, their practices, and festivals, etc., etc. Lent and all that sort of stuff. Okay, they fell from the Papist religion and became Protestants, as their posterity still are and remain to this very day. And for the further advancement of the great work of Reformation then begun, the aforesaid princes and the rest did then order that the said divine discourses of Luther should forthwith be printed, and that every parish should have and receive one of the aforesaid printed books into every church throughout all their principalities and dominions, to be chained up for the common people to read therein. So he could read it, but he couldn't take it away with you, by the sounds of it. Upon which divine work or discourses the Reformation began before in Germany was wonderfully promoted and increased and spread both in England and other countries besides. But afterwards it so fell out that the Pope then living, Gregory XIII, understanding what great hurt and prejudice he and his popish religion had already received, by reason of the said Luther's divine discourses, and also fearing that the same might bring further contempt and mischief upon himself and upon the Popish Church, he therefore, to prevent the same, did fiercely stir up and instigate the Emperor then in being, Rudolphus II, to make an edict throughout the whole empire, decree or a law, that all the aforesaid printed books should be burnt, and also that it should be death for any person to have or keep a copy thereof, but also to burn the same, which edict or decree or law was speedily put in execution accordingly, insomuch that not one of all the said printed books, nor so much as any one copy of the same, could be found out nor heard of in any place. Yet it pleased God that in the year 1626, or anno 1626, a German gentleman named Casparus van Spa, with whom in the time of his staying, this person staying in Germany, about King James' business, he became very familiarly known and acquainted, having occasion to build upon the old foundation of a house wherein his grandfather dwelt at that time, when the said edict was published in Germany for the burning of the aforesaid books, and digging deep into the ground under the said old foundation, one of the said original books was there happily found lying in a deep obscure hole, being wrapped in a strong linen cloth, which was waxed all over with beeswax within and without, whereby the book was preserved fair without any blemish. And at the same time Ferdinandus too, being emperor in Germany, who was a severe enemy and persecutor of the Protestant religion, the aforesaid gentleman and grandchild to him that had hidden the said books in that obscure hole, fearing that if the said emperor should get knowledge that one of the said books was yet forthcoming and in his custody, whereby not only himself might be brought into trouble, but also the book in danger to be destroyed, as all the rest were so long before. And also calling the writer to mind, and knowing that he had the High Dutch tongue very perfect, this is that Captain Henry Bell, that he had the High Dutch tongue very perfect, did send the said original book over hither into England or was sent to him, right? And therewith did write him a letter, wherein he related the passages of the preserving and finding out the said book. In other words, that preserved book, and was found, etc. And also he earnestly somebody moved him in his letter, that for the advancement of God's glory and of Christ's church, he would take the pains to translate the said book, to the end that most excellent divine work of Luther might be brought again to light. Whereupon Captain Henry Bell took the said book before him, and many times began to translate the same, but always he was hindered therein, being called upon about other business. That's what happens. Insomuch that by no possible means could he remain by that work. Then about 6 weeks after he had received the said book, it fell out that he being in bed with his wife one night between 12 and 1 of the clock, she being asleep, but himself yet awake, there appeared unto him an ancient man. Okay, so he's having some sort of visitation, standing at his bedside, arrayed all in white, having a long and broad white beard hanging down to his girdle steed, who taking him by his right ear spake the words following unto him. Okay, so it's not Gandalf from Harry Potter or anyone else. It's probably angel of the Lord or the Lord himself. Sirrah, will you not take time to translate that book which is sent unto you out of Germany? I will shortly provide for you both place and time to do it. And then he vanished away out of my sight, or out of his sight. So it's a bit like Joseph Smith having a visitation from an angel of the Lord. Whereupon, being much thereby affrighted, he fell into an extreme sweat, insomnia? Insomnia. That his wife, awakening and finding him all over wet, she asked him what he ailed, what was wrong with him. He told her what he had seen and heard, but never did heed nor regard visions nor dreams. And so the same fell soon out of his mind. He didn't really believe in visions or dreams, or he probably just thought it was something, a nightmare or something, a dream that he was having in that sense. Then about a fortnight after he had seen that vision on a Sunday, he went to Whitehall to hear the sermon, after which ended, he returned to his lodging, which was here at King Street, at Westminster, and sitting down to dinner with his wife, 2 messengers were sent from the whole council board with a warrant to carry him to the keeper of the gatehouse, Westminster, there to be safely kept until further order from the lords of the council, which was done without showing him any cause or any reason at all. The cause of the captain's commitment was his pressing the Lord Treasurer for arrears of pay. So he owed him some money, right? He really wanted the money that he owed him. That's what it sounds like. So he was carried away to the gatehouse Westminster, and he's kept there safely until further order from the lords of the council, which was done without showing him any cause or reason. Yet the cause of the captain's commitment was pressing the Lord Treasurer for arrears of pay. At all wherefore he was committed. Upon which said warrant he was kept 10 whole years close prisoner, so he's thrown in jail by the looks of it, where he spent 5 years thereof about the translating of the said book. So he's in jail and he's translating it. Insomuch as he found the words very true, which the old man in the aforesaid vision did say unto him, that he would shortly provide for him both place and time to translate it. And then after he had finished the said translation in the prison, the late Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Loud, understanding that he translated such a book called Martin Luther's Divine Discourses, sent unto him, the writer, chaplain Dr. Bray, into the prison with this message following: Captain Bell, my Lord Grace of Canterbury hath sent me unto you to tell you that his Grace hath understood that you have translated a book of Luther's, touching which book his Grace many years before did hear of the burning of so many thousands in Germany by the then Emperor. His Grace therefore doth desire you that you would send him unto him the said original book in Dutch, and also your translation, which after his Grace hath perused shall be returned safely unto you. Is he really going to return it, or is he going to burn it like all the rest the king etc. did before? Whereupon Captain Henry Bell told Dr. Bray that he had taken a great deal of pain in translating the said book, and was very loath to part with it. He didn't want to part with it out of his hands. He didn't want to depart with it, and therefore he desired him to excuse him to his Grace, that he could not part from it, with which answer he at that time returned again to his master. But the next day after he was sent to him again, and he was told, upon his honour, his word, that the book should be as safe in his custody, if not safer than in his own, for he would look it up in his own cabinet to the end no man might come upon it or unto it but only himself, that one particular person, that no one would be able to access it, no one would be able to pinch it, take it away and burn it, all that sort of stuff. It would be perfectly safe with him. Thereupon, knowing it would be a thing bootless for him to refuse the sending of them, by reason he was then of such great power that he would have them nolens volens, he sent both of them unto him. Then after he had kept them in his custody 2 months, and had daily reading it daily, he sent the said doctor back to him to tell him that he had performed a work worthy of eternal memory, and that he had never read a more excellent divine work, yet saying that some things therein were fitting to be left out or edited, and desired him not to think long that he did not return them unto him soon. And he goes on and on like that. And there's a copy of the order from the House of Commons, an order ordained by the Lords and Commons assembled, and so forth. The contents of the book themselves were gathered from the mouth of Luther by his friends and disciples, and chiefly by Anti Lauterbach and John Aurifaber, Goldschmidt, who were very much with the great reformer towards the close of his life. They consist of notes of his discourses, of his opinions, his cursory observations, and the freedom of private friendship, in his walks during the performance of his clerical duties. And at table the reporters were brimful of zeal. Whatever the man of God uttered was forthwith entered upon their tablets. They were with him at his uprising and his downlying, so when he got up and when he went to sleep, probably up to his death. They were with him at his uprising, getting up in the morning and lying down at night, They looked over his shoulder as he read or wrote his letters. Did he utter an exclamation of pain or a pleasure, of joy or sorrow? Down it went. He put the pen down and retired. Did he aspirate a thought above breath, or was caught by the intent ear of one or other of the listeners and committed to paper? So they did it for him. An anecdote told by Luther himself to Dr. Zingengref amusingly illustrates the assiduity of these German Boswells. During a colloquy in which Dominus Martinus was exhibiting his wonted energetic vivacity, he observed a disciple hard at work with pencil and paper. The doctor, slyly filling his huge wooden spoon with the gruel he was discussing by way of supper, rose and going up to the absorbed note-taker, threw the gruel in his face and said, laughing lustily, "Put that down too." That he was throwing food in his face, being a bit of a clown there. There can be as little doubt of the completeness of the authenticity of their notes. Filled with the most profound respect for the venerable man of God, they would have deemed it sacrilegious to omit or alter or modify out or anything that fell from the lips of Martin Luther, I guess. The oracle had spoken, it was their pride and glory to repeat its words with the most scrupulous fidelity. We'll describe the result in words of an eloquent letter to the translator, prefixed to the folio edition of 1652. Herein is a full character of the free and zealous spirit of Martin Luther, who was a man of God, raised in his generation with invincible courage to beat down the strongholds of Satan, wherein for many generations he had captivated the spirits of our forefathers under popery. The depth and solidity of his judgment may be discovered in the writings which he himself did publish in his lifetime, but in this collection of his exemplary discourses published since his death, the fullness of his affection and genuine readiness of his spirit may be seen, which did incline him to advance the truth of the gospel and manifest the testimony of Jesus upon all occasions. And surely this person, this writer, had met in that which he had looked upon with many excellent and fundamental truths necessary to be minded in this age, or that age, as well as in that wherein he spake them, in that era that Martin Luther obviously spoke them and wrote them down. And the gracefulness which they have in their familiar and careless dress doth make them the more commendable to all men of ingenuity, not only of popular capacities, but even of more raised thought. Whence the writer did probably conjecture that the plainness and great variety of matters contained in these discourses did in the first Reformation ingratiate the delivery and insinuate the consideration of most eminent truths with acceptance into all men's apprehensions, so far as to cause the enemies of those truths to endeavour the suppressing of this book, which they found to be so much taking with everybody and so full of deadly blows given to their superstition and hierarchy, to their profaneness, hypocrisies and impieties. So he's basically saying this was a book of truth, writings, etc., done by Martin Luther himself, pointing out the hypocrisy, etc., the superstitions of the popery, the hierarchy, and the profaneness, and so forth. Who, when it was this book or these writings of Martin Luther were popular with the general public, it made them look silly, made them look foolish, and caused them some major problems. So they decided we have to put out an edict or a law, a decree that will go round up those books and burn them, so no one can read them anymore.
Right.
Because it's really kicking us in the nuts. We should indeed seek in vain elsewhere for more striking and interesting specimens of the talents, the disposition and the manners of the greatest reformer than in this volume of his tabletop. And certainly if the personal character of any individual deserves to be dwelt upon, it is that of Luther. In no other instance has such great events depended upon the courage, sagacity and energy of a single man, nor can there be found a more profitable study than the temper and peculiarities of one who by his sole and unassisted efforts made a solitary cell, his prison cell, the heart and the centre of the most wonderful and important commotion the world ever witnessed, who by the native force and vigour of his genius attacked and successfully resisted, and at length overthrew the most awful and sacred authority that ever imposed its command on mankind. In perusing the work itself, we may here observe, it must always be recollected, that they show the reformer in his undress, and are not to be taken as specimens of what he wrote or preached when girded up for great occasions, though it may be observed that, like most men of genius, there was less difference in the language and manner of Luther in private and public than is the case with those who cannot afford to be free, homely and familiar. A great peculiarity of both his preaching and writing was that, despising all form and authority, he went straight to the hearts of his hearers and readers, and never hesitated to use an image or impression, however coarse or homely, provided it conveyed his meaning with liveliness and force. The first German edition of the Tischreden, or Table Talk of Martin Luther, a folio volume, was published at Eisleben in 1566 under the editorial care of John Aurifaber. This edition was reprinted twice in 1567, and a fourth time in 1568. The last reprint is prefaced by some new pages from the pen of the editor, who complains of one Dr. Kugling as having, in a rival edition, made material alterations of the text. This rival edition, however, would appear never to have got beyond the manuscript form. At all events, it is unknown to bibliographers. The fourth editions already specified are exact reproductions, the ones of the zero infinite typographical blunders included. In 1569 appeared a new edition, Frankfurt folio, with an appendix of prophecies which the venerable man of God, just before his holy death, i.e. Martin Luther, delivered unto divers learned theologians and ecclesiastics, with many consolatory letters, opinions, narratives, replies, never before made public. The dedication to the Council of Rauschenberg, dated 24th March 1568, intimates that the editor, John Fink, had derived his new materials from various books and writings of Martin Luther. The prophecies, it is added, were due to the research of George Walther, preacher at Halle. Fabricius, Centifolium Lutheranum, page 301, mentions two other editions in folio, Eisleben, 1569-1577, but no copies of these editions are at present known. The next editor of the Tischreden was Andrew Stangwald, a Prussian, the continuator of the centuries of Magdeburg, who in his preface complains of the previous editions as very defective in the matter and full of flagrant errors of typography. He states that his own corrected and enlarged edition had been prepared from various manuscript conversations in his possession, aided by ample marginal notes to a copy of the original edition, formerly belonging to one of Luther's intimate associates, Dr. Joachim Merlinus. Stangwald's compilation, which appeared in 1571, Frankfurt, was reprinted in 1590 with a dedication to the Council of Mulhausen, and a preface with, in the editor announces a supplementary volume of colloquies and sayings, which however was never produced. The same text, but with Aurifaber's preface in lieu of Stangwald's, was reprinted in 1603, Jena, and again in 1621, Leipzig, and once more after an interval of 80 years in 1700, Leipzig, maybe that's a place in Germany, when Stangwald's preface was given, as well as Aurifaber's and Walther's collection of prophecies appended. This arrangement was reproduced in 1723, Dresden and Leipzig. Yeah, it must be a place in Germany. Another contemporary with Luther, Nicholas Sauneur, had also applied himself to the task of arranging his master's table talk, and the result of his labours, prefaced by a Life of the Great Reformer, appeared in 1577 and again in 1580 folio. This edition, however, does not materially depart from the text of Stangwald. The Tischreden, which had been hitherto excluded from the various collective editions of Luther's German works, were incorporated by Walch in the ponderous edition of 1743, Halle, but they were never inserted into the folio editions of the Reformer's Latin work. A selection from them indeed appeared in Latin immediately after their first publication in German. This selection, Frankfurt 1566, 8 volumes, and it's entitled, and it's got it there in Latin. The translator, Dr. Ericus, however, while making extracts from Aurifaber, gives a number of articles omitted by the German editor. Next, in 1558 to 1557, Dr. Henry Peter Rebenstock, pastor of Eschgersheim, set forth in 2 volumes Frankfurt on the Main, 8 volumes, and that's in Latin. Dr. Rebenstock informed us that his version was rendered not from Aurifaber, but from later editors. It was from this translation, couched in the most barbarous Latin, and replete with blunders of every description, that Bale criticised the Colloquia Mensalia. The edition itself, now excessively rare, is described by the Marquis de Rore in his Analecta Biblion, taken at 1840. Of course, of the English translation by Captain Bell, an account has already been given. In preparing that translation, the captain appears to have been animated by the same closely scrupulous and somewhat indiscriminating fidelity which characterised the labours of those who compiled the original work. Some of the more impossible facetious, indeed, which escaped the plain-spoken German in the elasticity of post-prandial converse, the translator has omitted or modified, but the infinite repetitions of meditations, consolations, concilia, judicia, narratones, responses in the same or closely similar words he has reproduced with the most provoking pertinacity. But it is by the omission carefully considered of these repetitions that this writer, W. Hazlitt, named below, has been able to give in the present version not merely the context of Aurifaber's collection, but large additions from the various other editors above specified. The chapters in particular of Antichrist, of the devil and his works, and of the Turks, which Michelet specifies as peculiarly interesting, they will be materially enlarged in this way. The ample index now given is an entirely new feature. Middle Temple, W. Hazlitt.